Do you know which Chief Justice this is? I'll bet that you don't. This is the 16th Supreme Court Chief Justice, William Rehnquist, who is remembered as one of the most successful Chief Justices of the Supreme Court. Rehnquist was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1924. His parents were William Benjamin Rehnquist, a conservative Republican that was a sales manager for a printing, equipment, and paper sales office. His mother was Marjorie Peck Rehnquist, who was a director for a small insurance company and a local civic activist. Rehnquist's educational career began at Shorewood High School, and then he went to Kenyon College before attending Stanford and eventually Harvard University. After briefly attending Kenyon College for one semester, Rehnquist joined the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II, where he never saw any combat. Rehnquist then attended Stanford University, where he received a Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Arts in Political Science. Rehnquist then attended Harvard University, where he received another Master of Arts in Government. Eventually, he returned to Stanford University and graduated from the Stanford Law School. During his time at Stanford Law School, he met Sandra Day O'Connor, who would later serve on the Supreme Court with him, and during their time at Stanford, they briefly dated. Rehnquist's professional career began as a law clerk for Robert Jackson, a moderate on the U.S. Supreme Court. Eventually, he moved to Phoenix, Arizona to begin a private practice. And from there, Richard Nixon won the presidency in 1968, and Rehnquist moved back to Washington, D.C. to serve as a deputy attorney general for the Justice Department. Nixon eventually nominated him as an associate justice of the Supreme Court. In 1986, when Chief Justice Warren Burger retired, Ronald Reagan named Rehnquist as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Rehnquist was involved in several landmark cases, including Texas versus Johnson, where he wrote a dissenting opinion on the court ruling allowing flag burning being protected by the First Amendment, and Kelo versus City of New London, where he wrote a dissenting opinion that allows local governments to force property owners to sell their properties to make way for private economic development that will increase property taxes. This was a violation of the Fifth Amendment protections of eminent domain. But his most controversial case was Roe versus Wade, where he wrote a dissenting opinion on the majority decision to make abortion legal. Interesting facts about Rehnquist are that during World War II, he was stationed in North Africa as a weather observer, and as a clerk, he encouraged Associate Justice Robert Jackson to support overturning Plessy versus Ferguson and supporting the concept of separate but equal. He was often referred to as the Lone Ranger because of his tendency to be on the opposite side of the majority in Supreme Court decisions. After 33 years' service in the Supreme Court, Rehnquist was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, but refused to retire and remained Chief Justice until his death in September 2005.
Raich versus Gonzalez. Who was involved in the case? Alberto R. Gonzalez, Attorney General petitioner. Angel McClary, Raich respondent. Paul D. Clement argued the cause for petitioners. Randy E. Barnett argued the cause for respondents. When did this case happen? Oral argument, November 29, 2004. Opinion announcement, June 6, 2005. Where did the case originate? The Court of Appeals held that the CSA was an invalid exercise of Congress's Commerce Clause power. Gonzalez then appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. What happened in the case? California's CUA Compassionate Use Act authorizes a certain amount of marijuana for medical uses. Raich and Monson, the respondents, are residents of California that are prescribed marijuana use prescribed marijuana for medical purposes. After Federal Drug Enforcement Administration agents destroyed all of Monson's weed plants, respondents brought this action seeking injunctive and declaratory relief prohibiting the enforcement of the Federal Controlled Substances Act to the extent it prevents them from possessing, obtaining, or manufacturing cannabis by personal medical use. Why did your case go to the Supreme Court? Rage claimed that enforcing the Controlled Substance Act against them would violate the Commerce Clause, the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, the Ninth and Tenth Amendment of the Constitution, and the doctrine of medical necessity. What was the decision by the Supreme Court? Reyes Gonzalez was a decision by the United States Supreme Court ruling that under the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, Congress may criminalize the production and use of homegrown cannabis even if the state law allows its use for medical purposes. What was the impact on American society? The state's power to set public health policies was deeply affected by the course of this debate in the way that it brought to question many restrictions and allowances of the Constitution for the state's government and national government.